Previously on 123, no. We're back. It's COMP123. It's week 13, lesson 13, part 3. And we talked yesterday about a little bit about lists. And I kept it simple. And now I'm going to complicate your lives with a little bit of complexity at the end. Right? So what do I mean by this complexity thing I'm talking about anyway? Well, I mean if I look up MSDN, the docs for MSDN, if I go list C#, right, as an example, it's going to bring up this list class system collections generic MSDN thing. So take a look at this while I do this, because you know that's how it goes. If you look through here, here are the constructors, the default constructors for list. List, I enumerable. I enumerable, remember that I in front of the enumerable? That's your interface, right? Now these are built-in interfaces that are built into C#, right? Not interfaces, the custom interfaces that we're creating, right? I've got capacity, count, item. These are some properties of lists and a bunch of methods, which I kind of showed you before, you know, in here. For example, if I can do a binary search. If I want to search through an item, a list, I can do copy to, clear, contains. I can determine if an element exists in a list, and so on. I can find. There's all kinds of things I can do that are part of you know, lists in general, right? One thing that we tried to do yesterday that we failed at doing because we thought it was easy is this sort thing, right? And if you notice, when I click on the sort, it says using the default comparer, right? Default comparer. Well, there is no default comparer in the list, right? Because a list, in order for you to use something called a default comparer, when you build something, for example, this is an example of a list. A string list. Now, there's a couple of other tokens here. One of them called dinosaurs, right? Here's dinosaurs as an example. And it looks like we're looking at this generic. That's what we're forming here, right? And if you notice, it says dinosaurs add. This is this kind of different way of doing things. And then we write line. But what we're looking really for is how do I create, that's C++, C#. Let's go look at C++, C# for a second. How do I create this, the same idea? I've got a part, here's my class part, right? I'll be okay. And we have two, if you notice, a couple of interfaces. One that's called IEquatable, right? Equitable, if you will. And the other one is IComparable. So one that equates or checks if something is equal to, and one that's comparable. Well, you remember that when I look at these interfaces, IEquatable and IComparable, they come with, remember what interfaces do? They outline a couple of methods that you need to include in your class, right? That's what they do. They force you to use these methods. This is a great example of how to use these interfaces, right? So first we call upon these two interfaces, IEquatable and IComparable. Okay, cool. And what the hell is IComparable anyway? So if I was to look it up, I go C# IComparable, and we can go through the IComparable interface and take we're going through the docs here. It comes with this one method, compare to. So I need to include something called compare to, this method that I need to you know, include in my class. So here's an example of integer. Compared to this object, right? I want to compare an object to something else, right? So I need to have a compare to method. That's what IComparable makes me do. IComparable, okay? It also talks about how to compare things that are less than 0, how things that are 0, and greater than 0, but it doesn't have equatable. Remember we talked about that. It doesn't go equals to, right? So we need to do that piece too. So here's IEquatable. So if I was to talk about this, so Control C, and I'm going to put that here, right? C#. Let's look at these two interfaces for a second. Here's IEquatable, right? And you guys are going to kill me, like I said, right? But hey, let's talk about this a little bit. IEquatable comes with equals, so that's that method. So we need to include equals and compare to. If we include those two methods, then we're compliant with the implementation of both interfaces, okay? So in order for me to implement both interfaces, I've got to have those two methods included in my class. We don't have those two methods in my class right now. If we include those two methods, they become the default comparables that we talked about before, the things that we need to make our sort method work. So here's our sort method, and if you notice, in my custom class, in this case, it's called part. Let me just make this a little bigger for you guys. I'll just zoom in a little bit here so you guys can see. My custom class is called part here online as an example, right? And my part class has these two interfaces, right? So here's a couple of instance variables or properties. These are using the default getters and setters, right? So there's a part name that has getters and setters, and there's also a part ID with getters and setters. These are the two things that I want to look at or compare to, if you will, right? I have my toString method, which in this particular case, the writer of this class has chosen to override. We can choose to override that or not. It's not necessary in our iEquatable and iComparable interface implementation. But I do have this, equals. I need that. And I need to do this public override bool, right? It's definitely a Boolean type of object, right? Equals. And if I say if my object is equal to null, then return false. So if there's nothing to compare to, right, don't return anything. And then I'm going to say part. This is the weird stuff when you look at this, because look, I'm calling upon part. This is my class, and I'm declaring a new object inside of my class, almost like an anonymous object here, right? I'm saying part object as part, right? Object, which is this, as, which I'm basically casting as a type of part. So I'm saying whatever I get into my equals method, an example of this would be an object. Remember, object is the super duper class that encompasses all objects that are included in C#. So every object, everything in C# is an object. But I've got to cast the object that I'm getting into my equals method as a part, because that's, in this particular case, it's a class part. For our case, what's our custom class called? Movie. So we'd have to do the same thing, but we're going to have to say object as movie. We're going to cast it as a movie object. And a movie object in our case has title, it has category, and it has cost. So if we want to sort it according to title, in this particular case, if object as part is equal to null, right? Object as part, return false. Else return equals object as part, right? Which is this, the actual object itself. I'm returning back the object, which is Boolean. Okay. Whoa. Bad. All right, so we need this one. That's definitely something like this. We're going to have to include some kind of equals method. Hey, I also get this sort by ascending thing. Sort by name ascending, right? Which is the default comparer. Here's the, if you look at for, I can sort by ascending if I want to, right? Okay, let's take a look at this now. So I've got this, my compare to function. Here's my compare to function, which I am definitely, I need this because this is my default comparator. If I don't have a compare to function, I can't sort. I know that. I can't create a sort unless I have my default compare to or comparer that I've added in here. And it needs to be of type int in this particular case, right? I'm comparing to my part. I'm taking in a part. Again, type of class, type of object, which is I'm just defining here, right? And I'm comparing. I'm calling this local part compare part. If compare part is equal to null, doesn't exist, then return 1, which means it's it doesn't exist, so it's good. We're good to go. Else, return this dot part ID, because what they're doing is the default comparer in this case is sorting by part ID. Here's my part ID. Right here, we could have sorted by part name, right? But in this case, the default comparer that's included with this particular class sorts by part ID, not by part name. So we look at the part ID, and then when we go do the sort function looks sort method looks for that default comparer and says, how do I compare? How do I sort? I'm going to look at this to see how this works. I also call this if you notice, this bool equals, again, for a part of other type of part, right? And if I say, well, if this, here's the really weird thing, because didn't we just define equals up here. Well, here's one where Boolean override bool equals. And here's a public bool equals. But does that mean that I have two signatures? Yes, it does. So one is when I'm comparing the whole object, the whole part, and the other one when I include, which we'll call anything else, something else. And if you notice, it's of type part, which means the stuff that I'm looking at right now. So again, if you notice what it says here, things that are missing is it should also override equal if I want to do a comparison operator. Remember, you can override comparison operators, built-in comparison operators, equal, and not equal. I should do this as well to make sure. After I've done all this stuff to my class, so I got to add a few more things to my class, then down here I can do a parts add like we did yesterday, my custom way, and then finally do this parts sort. And the parts sort is going to access the default comparable or comparer that's built into my parts class and then do the sort. So these are all the preparation that we have to do in order for me to make this sorts method work. Are you ready? Let's do it. Now again, I'm doing it here for you guys, so you guys can use this code if you need to, if it works, in your project. I don't mind doing this, all right, at all. So let's take a look. So first, we need to do this. And if you notice, when I do this I equatable and I comparable, right, I also have to pass in the type of the class name into my I equatable and I comparable. I need to do that. All right. Now remember what also we've got here is system collections generic. Let's make sure we have that as one of our usings. I have systems collections generic up here, which means I have access to all the lists and everything else. I'm pretty good that way, right? Okay, so I need to do that. So now the next thing is I want to go into my solution and I want to go back into my movie.cs file. So this is actually my default, my custom class that you and I have created. All right. So here I've got my default public properties, but now I want to implement these two new interfaces. So again, I'm going to start typing I, and if I start typing I, you notice that I have a bunch of things here. I comparable, right? And if you notice, there's an I comparable with less than greater than signs, right? It's probably clear that this is the one that I want, right? Because if you look at the example, right, I'm just using, this is just right up the doc. I'm looking at the docs, the API documentation for C#. And this is what you need to do sometimes when you program, right? Just there and go, okay, how do I do this? I never did this before. How do I do it? Well, here's an example from Microsoft, right, how to do it, right? So I comparable, I need to do that, and I'm probably going to need to use this. So if I need to use this one, I'm going to put in there movie as my, I'm going to pass in there this special thing here to make sure that when I pass in my I comparable interface, I need this. Okay, that's one. Next, okay, if I go back, I need to be I equatable. So let's do that in the same order. So I'm going to say, make a space here and go I, and I'll put E. Here's I equatable, and if you notice, I equatable is right here. It's an interface, and I'm going to put in there, of course, this movie, right, with a comma that separates them. Okay, cool. Well, now that I have those two things, right, and if I save this thing, and if I try to build, I'm not going to run it. If I try to build the solution, right, so I go build, it's going to go meh. It says does not implement interface member, right, because I'm trying to, see this one says I equatable and this is I comparable. And I need to have those two piece parts. Remember, the compare to and the equals in order for my class to work properly now. It won't allow me to build out my stuff. And if I hover over it, it actually tells me that. It says, does not implement the interface member system.iEquatable or equals. And then it tells me the equals right there, the equals method that I've got to override. Okay, so I need to put that somewhere. I'm probably going to put that stuff after my constructor, because these up here, these are my properties. This is my public properties, right? These three. These are my private instance variables, and this is my constructor. And down here, these are things that I'm going to implement that are going to be part of my public methods, if you will. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I need to kind of put those in place. So let's take a look here. I'm going to scoot back here. I have this public override bool thing, right? And I'm going to just, if I didn't include the equals, why do you think I need to use equals and this comparable thing? Because if I don't have equals, what if the two things somehow, for whatever reason, in my list, in my parts list, they're the exact same, right? What do I do with them? Now, chances are they will not be the same, right? So theoretically, I could not include the I-equatable piece if I don't want to. Remember, all I need is a default comparer. I don't need to have my I-equatable. They have a perfect example here online. But if I didn't include this piece, I wouldn't be killed for it. All right, let's go back. I do need to have this piece in here, this public compare to method. So I'm just going to copy paste. I'm just going to kind of go in here, for my own little way. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to kind of paste that in. So Control V. Now, obviously, it makes no sense to use I'm going to say default comparer for movie, right? And this has got to be movie. And I'm going to say compare movie, right? In fact, if anything, let me just undo that. I'm just going to refactor this thing here. So refactor, rename, and I'm going to say compare movie. Compare movie. There we go. Now, I don't have this part ID. That doesn't exist because I'm copying and pasting. But what I do have is what I want to sort by, this title. I want to sort by title, right? So I can go like this. I'll give you to in a second. Title, right? Now, if I go this title, I'm getting the title. All right. I mean, I can use the property, or I could use this underscore title, which is my instance variable, and I probably want to do that, right? So I know that it's my private instance variable that I'm getting. I'm going to copy this in here and put that over here as well, right? So this definitely is one piece that I need, because what I want to do is say this compare to method that I'm adding in here, I'm saying I want to take in a movie, right? And I want to look at if my compare movie is equal to null, which means if somehow my list is null, then don't return anything, return a 1, right? Otherwise, I want to take the title of my movie and compare it to this title, whatever the title I'm looking at, and I'm going to compare it to the title that I'm getting from the part that I'm comparing, or the movie that I'm comparing to. So I'm comparing it based on title. My default comparer then, right, for my movie type, and I'll say, just as a note, use it, or what should we call it, compares the title property, if that makes sense. Okay, you guys all caught up? All right, so that's one piece, not done. Because remember, I have this I-equatable piece. If I was to take, just curious, let's try this out. If I was to take this I-equatable piece out for now, just because, I'm a rebel, right? I don't feel like doing this. And again, in your mind, you're the programmer. You can implement things the way you like, right? I know I need the I-comparable because I need to have this compare to method in order for me to make my sort work. So let's check this out. I'm going to go into my movie form now. I do have, my class has changed, so I could definitely do this. Now here, before I do this whole movie thing here, when I pump out my class, I'm going to put it in here that says movies, right? Movies dot sort. If I do that now, right, theoretically, I do have a default comparer that I'm using, right? Because I've included it in my movies class, my movie class, right? So let's see if this works. Remember, it didn't work last time. It gave us an error, right? All right, let's see if it works now. So I'm going to run it, and hey, look what it's giving me over here. So here, I'm not in sorted order, but here it is in sorted order. So my sort works. Okay? Let me just stop this for a second. Now, there's a problem. I'm telling you, there's a problem. If I have the exact same movie, it's equatable, it's equal, that's when I have an issue. If I have something that's equal to something else, for whatever reason, title-wise, like Death Race 2, Death Race 2, if I have two Death Race 2, for whatever reason, right? Now, it's never going to happen for us in this particular case. Our example won't need an equatable because we're never going to have, chances are, the same movie put in twice. But if you do, you need this equatable function to check to see if one equals the other and to put them together, like one in the same space, as an example. Otherwise, it's going to give you an error. It's going to pump out an error. We'll check that out, and I'll add in another object that's exactly the same as the other one and see what happens, okay? But before we do that, let's go back to movie form, because I took away, remember yesterday, just to fix the problem as a workaround, right? And I'm the kind of guy that I like to, when you and I get together, I just want to give you problems. I want to give you the solution, right? So here I'm looking at the combo box, and last time the sorted, or the sorted property, I'm choosing this to be true. And when I do that now, and if I run it, if my sorted property is true, if you notice I get Death Race 2, Sneeze of the Witch, and the Dilemma, all right? And everything comes out nice, 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 huh? Okay, cool, cool. But let's say, here's my list, right? And I'm going to add in Death Race 2 another time. I can do that just by copy and pasting, right? What happens with my comparable? Does it crash? What does it do? Does it add it in again? How does it sort this thing out? Now, I know that my combo box has got all the built-in comparables and equatables and everything else in the back end. Because remember, my combo box is a list, right? So I don't have to do anything there. It's done. It's already pre-programmed nicely, perfectly, right? But me, myself, this one, I don't have anything like that. There's no equatable. So what will happen? Let's run this and see what happens to it. Hey, Death Race 2, Death Race 2, they kind of put both together on the top. It really didn't do anything, did it? Because I'm never comparing them. I'm never going to say, hey, if one is equal to the other one, you know, then check to see if one is equal to the other one. I never do that, right, with my class. I should, right, theoretically. If I want to make a perfect class list that I want to kind of compare one thing to the other, then this is what I want to do. But in my case, I don't need it. Okay, so it doesn't really make any difference to me whatsoever. So again, all I would need is I compare. But let's go back to review. Here's my methods. On the documentation online, it shows me that I probably need both, right? I equatable and I comparable. But remember, all the list needs is a default comparer, which is right here. That's all I took, right? Why am I gonna, write extra stuff when I don't need to? I only need this compare to method, and by the way, I have the method here online of how to do it, right? I just have to morph this thing so it works with my custom class. I don't have a part ID, I have titles, I have categories, I have costs, right? So that's where my compare to method works. If I wanted to compare it to cost, sort by cost, that would be a totally different thing. And I could use my cost in here, where it says instead of part ID, and here's my custom class. So instead of using title, I could use cost, because that's one of my my variables, and it would sort by cost. And it would sort in ascending order. That's the other thing. What if I want to sort by descending order, where there's also other methods we're not going to go into called order by, where you can order by a specific thing and sort by ascending order and descending order, and then you have to include additional interfaces for that. So this is a great example of an interface that we finally were able to use, that we need to use, iComparable, all right, that basically compares one list item with another, and then uses that, the sort method uses the comparable to check to see if one is greater than the other, or less than. Okay, so that's really this one in a nutshell. Let's go back to movie form. I don't want to add two Death Race 2s. Okay, I only want to add one of them. Okay, cool, cool. So, I kind of gave you the basis for how you could do this. We talked yesterday, could you load these things in? And we're going to move on to another topic now. So the list thing is done. You've got your class. I'll go into my Team Explorer, and I'll upload this thing so you have the changes. So you can certainly use this code that I'm giving you right now for your application that you're going to be writing. I don't mind because it's complex. And I don't expect you to know it by hand. But I want to show you how to look for stuff. This is the whole lesson here. The lesson is trying to show you if I didn't know how to do something, where would I go? I'd go on MSDN, right? I search for C# method or whatever it's going to be, and I'm going to pull that in and include that into my application because it makes sense. And I'm only going to pull the stuff in that I need, nothing extra. So you need to know what you need first of all, right? So here's my included changes. I'm just going to say updated movie class added iComparable interface, right? Okay, and I'm gonna go home and unsync commits and sync. And so if everything goes well, then you guys should have that update. Okay, cool. So this is definitely one piece I wanted to hit today because I didn't want to leave you hanging and go, Tom doesn't show us how to sort anything. That would be bad, right? So lists are powerful, but you need to know how to use them. And this is one of the things you need to know. And now again, every language has, I'll say it like this, different nuances. In Java, right, just to let you know, the sort algorithm is much simpler, right? Now again, we've created a custom class that we're using as objects. Because remember, my list isn't just a list of strings or a list of integers. That would be easy to sort, right? Because the integer class has its comparable built in. His default compare for the list class, I can just compare one number to the other if it's an integer list, right? If it's a string list, same thing, right? It's got its default compare built in. String is the data type that we're talking about. But my data type is movie. It's my own custom data type. So it doesn't have a default compare, and that's why I have to create one. But if I was to make it a very simple list, like for example, a string list, right? No problem. I wouldn't have to do any of this stuff. I can just go the list.sort, whatever the list name is, .sort, right? And then it sorts. No problem. Okay? So don't think it's so complex every single time. It's complex because we made it complex because our friend Jay said, hey, let's create a class, right? Which I agree with. I think it's a great idea. I gotta blame somebody, Jay, right? Let's blame Jay. I can blame Neil too because it's sitting next to Jay, but just cuz, right? But what the hell? So we're done here, but this is really, we're not going to focus more on movie form, on our movie class here, but I wanted to kind of tie this up a little bit and how this works. Okay, cool. Now we talked about one of the requirements. If I go back to, I'm going to kind of close this off now. One of the requirements in assignment 7, right? If we look at assignment 7 here, so we hit one of them, how to split things off. Yes, you could look at a file. Yes, you could open a file stream. Yes, you could read from a file. Yes, you could have all the movies in a file. That would make it so simple. But for now, I would accept it the brute force way for you guys. If your assignment, if you just added every little thing to the list 19 times, 20 times, right? I'm good with that. Don't fret. Don't make it crazy for yourself because remember, I never said load from a file and blah, blah. It's too much work, right? Remember, you only have a certain amount of time left. You only have a week left to get this thing in, right, pretty much. And I don't want to stress your brain around it. This isn't an exercise on everything you know. It'd be nice if I could wrap things up like this. But in reality, it's a lot of stuff to do within a couple weeks, right? So I can't expect all that. And please do what I'm asking you to do and no more, okay, which is add this extra stuff in here that I've asked you. Even line by line is fine. Okay, we know how to do this. We did this already, this file, print, stream, and cancel. This is just a menu, which is you can simply add. We covered menu last week, right? So that's nothing new. You don't have to worry about that. Splash screen, though, is something different. And how would you create a splash screen? Well, if I was to look up, again, let's go back to MSDN. If I said, C# splash screen. Can I do something like that? Does it exist? Right? How do I do it? How to build a splash screen in Windows Forms. Stack Overflow. Here's one. The splash screen class. Okay, let's see that. Now I know VB has a built-in splash screen, right? It really does. But there is a splash screen class, which is a new instance of the splash screen class with a specified resource, right? And it has a few methods that normally we have in all forms. But really what we're looking for is some kind of splash screen form, if you will, that comes up. That's what it comes up with. And, you know, it shows off a splash screen. A splash screen would be almost like, you know, a form that would come up for 3 seconds. So you can use and make your own custom form. And then it would go away. And then it would launch the next form. Okay? Almost like any other app that's out there these days, right? Kind of comes up with, hey, this is Tom, right? And this is logo by Tom, whatever. You have to put your logo up for 3 seconds and then it goes away. How do you do that? Now there's different implementations. Here's C#. Let's look at VB for a second. VB, if I look at it, it also has the same kind of implementation, right? Actually, they're the same for everything. If you notice, they have splash screen exists for each one of them. And it says, provides a startup screen for a Windows Presentation Foundation WPF application. Whoa, we're not doing a WPF application, man. We're not doing that at all. I need a splash screen that's for Windows Forms, right? Let's go back. So that's what I need. How to build, and it says how to build, here's another one, Stack Overflow, how to build a splash screen in Windows Forms. If I scroll down, it says set the form's control box, maximize, minimize, and show icon properties to false. This is telling you how to just use a regular screen, right? Set the start position property to center screen. We do that all the time, huh? So set the form border style property to none. Set the form's minimum size and maximum size to the same as its initial size, so it can't be resized, right? And then some kind of, you know, other control to take it away when it's done. Okay, let's build this thing, right? So I need a new form, and it's going to have a few of these options. Okay, so we're going to make it so that we're going to make a new Windows form here. So I'm going to close this movieform.cs down because we're done with what we need here for now. And I'm going to go into my Solution Explorer. Here it is. And I'm going to right-click onto my project. I'm going to say Add. I'm going to go Add New Item. And let's take a look at all the items that I can use. If I look at Visual C# as an example, I can add all these different things. Look at this. I have different classes, some other stuff, storm spouts, Windows form. I could add that one. Hey, look, here's an about box. I asked you guys for an about box. It kind of does it all there for you. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. If I go back down here, does it have, if I look through here, all these little things here, I've got a Windows service, I've got all these different things, but I don't have a specific, like if you notice, a splash form. I don't have that kind of thing here. Funny enough, if you were to look on the other languages, if I was to go to Visual Basic, however, and if I was to look at Visual Basic forms, and if I was to, if I was running a Visual Basic application, Visual Basic does have a default splash form. Now, I can't look at it here because, of course, I'm looking at items that work with Visual C#. So for us, it would just simply be the Windows form that we want to add. Okay, so here's our Windows form. And if you notice down here, I'm going to call this splash form, right? Because that's what it is, splash form. Okay, and here's our splash form. It's empty. Huh? Let's do what this bloody thing says to do. Well, we know what to do already. I don't have to look there. I can go properties. I can kind of focus on this. Here's my splash form. I don't want a couple things. I don't want my start position has to be center screen, right? My text isn't really important, so we'll leave it the way it is for now, right? Let's keep looking at other items here. I have to take away my control box because I can't have a control box anymore. So control box to false, right? Because that takes away that whole group of controls. Our minimize and maximize size, make maximum size and minimize size, minimum size and maximum size should be the same, so I can't resize my form. So if I was going to make it like this big, right, all the time, and let's just leave it like this for now. You can make it whatever size what makes sense for you. It should be like 300 by 300, yeah? So because that way it will stop. That way it'll stop my form from being resized. So here's my minimum size and my maximum size. Oops. So that has to happen. My minimize box is going to be false. I can make that false too, just to, why not? And my maximize box, I'll turn that off too, just in case someone tries to maximize and minimize in other ways. And also, you know, if you notice, there's a size grip style auto, right? If I really want to protect it, I can change my size grip style to hide, right? If I was to run this form now, how do I run this form first, by the way? Do you guys remember? I'll show you. If I go back to Solution Explorer, here's my Solution Explorer, right? I'm going to keep my movie form open for a second, but if I go back to Solution Explorer, and I'm going to Control S here, if I go back to my program.cs file, which is right here, right, and double click, if you notice here, I have my application run, and it says new movie form, right? Well, this new movie form ain't going to be the one that starts first now. It's going to be what? New splash form, right? Because that's the one that I want to start off, right? So new splash form is the one that's going to start off now. My movie form right now doesn't exist. Right now it hasn't been created yet. I'm starting off with my splash form first. You can make whatever form you want start off. But I do that here in my program.cs file. Okay, let's run this thing and see what happens at this point. Bam, it's there, right? And I got my splash form and everything else. And there's, if you notice, there's no controls whatsoever, and I can't resize this thing whatsoever. I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't do anything about it. Okay, that's one thing. Still, there's a couple more things I can do. Here's my splash form. I'm going to go back to properties. And my border style, if I go back to, if I look at this, these different options, and if I look at here what it says, my forms control box, maximize box, minimize box, and show icon properties to false. Okay, let's turn my show icon property off as well. So I forgot to do that. So if I show icon false, and then if I run this thing, it's going to look the same with no show icon on the top left corner, right? That's important. So I'm kind of making up the way my application, my form is going to look, my splash form. What else? And it also says form border style property to none. Okay, so form border style property right now is sizable. I'm going to make this none. What does it do? It looks like this. Right? Okay, cool. Let's try this out. Boom. It kind of comes up as this style right here. Right? Can you see it?
We can't see it, but
All right. If I change my form border style instead of none to fixed single, right? That's what it comes back with. If I change my form border style, you know, there's different options here to fixed dialog, right? Or if I do something else like, you know, fixed 3D, right? It gives me a kind of 3D look or whatever. But what I want to do is I want to make it my form border style to none. Now, to make it so that you guys can see this, I'm going to change my back color. So I'm going to go to my back color. I'm going to change it so that it's another color. So we know that it's just our start screen color. So I'm going to make it so it's a little darker so you guys can see the form. So maybe we'll make it something that makes sense when it loads info. For example, maybe I'll make it this info color. Right? So we know, can you see that now? So when I launch it, it'll be like looking like this, like a big square. Yeah, you see that? If you notice, there's no borders whatsoever, and it'll come up almost like it looks borderless. Now you can add a border, you can make colors and everything else, whatever you want. What we need to do, I'm just going to click this stop button here. What we need to do is add some kind of logo here, right? Well, if I go back to my toolbox, right, I do still have VB Power Packs in play, right? So I'm going to kind of lock or pin my toolbox in place. For now, I'm just going to pull in. I mean, obviously you can put an image here if you want. But for now, I'm going to kind of pull in an oval shape just so that this would be my logo, right? So I'm going to make this logo, you know, I'm going to resize this thing. And this is where my logo would be. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be, so I'm just resizing it right now. That's probably right around the right size. I'll make it so that it's, the size is 160 by 160. There it is. And that's the form size. That's the logo size. That was right. And now I'm going to put this somewhere in the middle. All right, so it's kind of a form. This is where my logo, think about this as a placeholder for my logo. You see that?
Yeah.
I got it from my VB Power Packs. Remember we did that VB Power Packs thing last time? You get it from there. If you don't have VB Power Packs, you're going to have to load that in your system again, blah, 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 and get that going. You may not have it in front of you because this room may not have it, but we did it in the other room. and then you have to add that in and go through that whole process again, right? If you don't want to do this, and if you don't have VB Power Packs, you could simply drag and drop a picture box. So let's do that. So this is one option. I'll get rid of this thing because I don't want you guys to cry too much, right? So let's put in, we'll just add in a picture box instead. Here we go. Here's a picture box. And we'll resize the picture box to my liking. I'll make this 160 by 162 just because, we'll make sure that it's the same. And I'll try and center it as much as possible to the screen. It gives me a few smart guides. Okay, my picture box right now is empty and I need some kind of image that I want to put in here, right? So let's just grab an image from the internet for our usage here. I don't know, well maybe we can find some kind of funky logo, right, that I want to kind of find, right, online. Let's pull a funky logo down, right? There we go, be funky. I like that one, right? And we're just going to, oh, this is good. It even has a transparent background. I will save image as, I'm going to put it on my desktop just so that way I can find it again, right? It is on my desktop. It's a ping image, and we'll just call it be funky. Be funky. Okay, cool. Here's my image, be funky. I saved it. It's on my desktop. And I want to add this in, and you see this little smart arrow right here. I can choose my image from here, and what it'll do is it'll add it into my resource library. So I click onto it, right? I can click on the import because I don't have anything in my resource library. I can click on be funky and press open, and then if I've done things correctly, it'll show it. Now it doesn't show anything here because guess what? It's big, right? But we'll fix that. And if you notice, my size mode is normal, and I'm going to go to auto size. If I auto size it, no, that's not right. If I go to stretch, let me undo that for a second. Undo. And I want to go into stretch. Be funky. Right? So now, if you notice, my box has this little line around it, right? But when I run my actual object, my thing, it just says be funky in the middle, right? It doesn't have the box around it because that's just my picture box. So be funky looks pretty good, but it's kind of small. I want to make it a little bigger so it takes up most of my screen, right, as an example. And I have some other issues. Well, I have issues, but that's not your concern. But I mean, I have other issues with the application. If I, for example, stretch this box out, right, it kind of takes on the size, my logo takes on the size of my box, and that's not what I want to do. I'm just going to undo that. So maybe is stretch image the right one, or is it center image? Well, that's not it. You guys remember? Or was it zoom? Right? Zoom looks better, but zoom is small. So I want to make my picture kind of take up the size, almost the same size as my whole object here. So that way it can kind of be in the middle and bigger, right? So my picture box almost takes up the whole screen. Yeah? Let's run this thing now, and let's see how it works. Be funky, right? So that's where it comes in. And I want it to fade out. And I want it to launch my app, right? How do I do that? So are you guys satisfied with this as kind of a splash screen for now? Yes. This, I clicked here. I went to choose image, right? And then I imported, and I chose my image that I put on my desktop. And now what happens is, of course, when I did that, if I go to project properties, and if I look at resources, images, I see my Be Funky image. And if I look at my Solution Explorer, I have now a properties, or a resources folder that's built in, that gets generated, and I have my Be Funky ping file right here, right? Okay. Again, this is what I just called it. You guys can definitely call it other things if you're upset with the Be Funky name, right? But this is my company, my Be Funky company, right? So that's what I wanted to make this thing go. I'm being silly. Okay, how do I use some method of closing out this form and opening up the new form. This is still a form, even though this looks like what it is here, right? We're making a nice little logo or whatever. It's still a form. It has all regular form properties. It's a form class. It's just called splash form instead of movie form, right? So what do I do here? Well, there are definitely some other kinds of controls that I can use. I'm using common controls, right here. And there's other components that I can use. Like for example, I can use a timer component. Here's my timer component, right? I want to attach my timer component to my form. Remember, I need for it to work so that when my timer works, it's a timer, so it's going to count down in milliseconds, right? 3 seconds before it does something, closes the form down or something, right? Well, in order to make my timer work, I've got to take, it's under components, by the way. I got to take my timer component and drag and drop it onto the form, which does the same thing we saw before, which it drags and drops down here. So it's part of my form, but it actually exists outside of the viewable area of my form. It's almost like I've dragged in a new control that's invisible. My new invisible control called a timer. Now it's a form control. So it does stuff with my forms. It does things. So if I click on timer 1 for a second, right, and if I go to properties, it shows me my interval right now is 100, right? And by the way, my enabled, I have to enable my timer, or else, you know what, my timer is not going to work, right? So I got to change my timer property to enabled, and I got to change my interval from 100 to 3,000, right? Because that's 3,000 milliseconds, right? 3,000 milliseconds is 3 seconds, right? 1,000 milliseconds per second. That's the first thing I got to do, and then what I need to do is I need to activate my timer. I need to kind of create a event. Well, what are the events for my timer? I've got this tick event, right? So when on tick, right, when my timer fires, my 3 seconds is done, what will it do? Close my form, open the new one, right? Which we've already done last week, right? So let's double click. So now it creates this new timer event. Okay, so here's my new timer event. I know it's getting complicated, eh? Complicated again? Are we complicating your lives again, guys? Because, I don't want to do that too much. Okay, yes, I do. But that's just me. All right, so here's my timer tick event. And in my timer tick event, I'm saying when my timer is done, when my timer ticks, 3,000 milliseconds has passed, right? Then it's going to fire this event, right? And when the event triggers, I want it to activate my new form, right? And close down this form. Well, not close down, hide, right? So I never want to do anything. So I want to say active form. We can use active form again. Active form.hide, right? And I want to create my new form. Now, how do I do that? Did you guys remember how I did that? Come on, we covered this last week. I have to bring up the other document again and show you guys. Just as a review, right? So we did that multi-form thing. Well, let's just try hiding it first. So we're just going to take it away. Let's see if that works. How about that? And then we'll try and open up the new one. One step at a time, eh? So I'm going to launch my new object. It comes up, 1 millisecond. 1, 2, 3. See how it went away? 3 seconds. Hey, I'm giving you the solution for your assignment, right? Probably no one's going to look at this video anyway, but, hey, what the hell? Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Right? So 3 milliseconds, timer, it kicks off, and whoa, what happened? It says, null reference, an unhandled exception, system exception occurred in blah, 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 a definition information, object reference not set to an instance of an object. I did this active form hide, right? But now what happens? What if I say active form, well, it's hiding it, but there's nothing there, right? It's got a funky thing going on with this thing, right? It says this is the next statement that will fire, and when I hover over it, if I look at my problem, it says this unhandled exception, system null reference exception occurred in comp, additional information object reference is not set to an instance of an object. Object reference not set. Well, because I don't have an object, right? I'm using my active form default. How do I create an instance of my object? Can I say this? What if I was going to do, instead of active form.hide, can I go this.hide? Is that possible? I could do that too, right? Would that work? Would that give me the same bloody error as it already did? Let's check this out. Stop it and run it. Now, just think about why it's having 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I'm waiting for the error. Hold on. Oh, it didn't come up again, right? So again, we used active form before, but this keyword now points to the form itself. So we could always have used this. It's not a big deal. What we need to do now is kick off the new one, but the new one doesn't exist. The new form, which is movie form, right? Here's our movie form. This movie form doesn't exist yet. We have to instantiate this movie form, right? And we should do it inside the tick event handler, right? So we're going to say, movie form, my movie form, whatever, is equal to new movie form, and then launch this thing and make it go, right? And then I'm going to say movie form.show, right? Because I want to show the movie form, right? After I hide my splash screen. And now my movie form is going to be based off my splash screen, right? It's going to kick off from my splash screen. Let's check this out. So I'm going to go to my splash form. I'm going to go here. And of course, I've got to define my new movie form in here, inside this little area here. So I'm going to say movie form. Here's my movie form, right? And I'm just going to call this movie form lowercase, okay, just to make it easy. Movie form is equal to new movie form. So now I've instantiated the object. My object movie form exists, right? Now I got to kick it off. How do I do that? Even though it's there, it's not showing. And my property for the movie form right now is hidden by default, right? So I've got to show. So I say this.hide, and then I'm going to say movie form.show. And if I go movie form.show, it's going to bring up the movie form theoretically. Let's see if it works now. Let's run this puppy and see if it's going. Huh? Be funky. 1, 2, 3. Nice. Let's see if it crashes. Okay, it's not crashing. Huh? What happened? Oh, hold on. What's going on? What's going on, hey? Hey, what's going on? How come it's doing this? Because my timer is still going. How do I turn my timer off? Right? Well, once this is done, once my timer fires and I show my movie form, I want to go my timer 1, because that's the next piece I need to do, dot enabled, right, is equal to false, right? Because I want to disable my timer. I don't want to enable it more than once. So once my timer kicks off, my timer is an interval. Remember it said here, if I go back to my splash form, that's why we have to test these things out, right? Otherwise you're like, hey, what's going on, Tom? How come it's not working? If I go to my properties here, I'll pin my properties here for a second so you can see the timer. I'm going to go back into the properties view for my timer. If you notice, it says interval. That's a keyword, right? To me, interval, it goes every 3,000 milliseconds, something's going to happen. Hey, you can use this timer as a game loop, right? Instead of every 3,000 milliseconds, I can make it, once every 60 times a second if I want, right? To create a game loop and make a game, right, for my timer. I can just call, instead of timer 1, I can call this thing game loop. It'll be the same thing, right? To make a game here. We're not making games. We're just making it so that the timer only fires off one time. After 3,000 milliseconds, it's gone. It kicks off and stops the timer. Let's run this thing again. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I'm just moving it aside so you guys can see that there's no more coming up, eh? It doesn't keep spawning. All right? Yeah, it's spawn. The spawn, right? Okay, cool. We don't have a close-off methodology right here. We don't have something that closes this form off. So I'm just going to expand this form a little bit here and add in a new button, right? So I'm going to kind of save. I'm going to kind of save everything here. And I've got my splash form. I've also got my splash form.cs. I'm just going to close all this down. I don't need to touch this right now. I do want to work on my on this form itself. I want to add this exit button in here. And just as a reminder how to do this, of course, I would go into, I'm going to pin this thing here. I'm going to go into Common Controls, click a button, drag it in. Right, here's my button. I'm going to rename this button as my exit button. Right, here it is. and I'm going to scroll down into my button text and call it exit. Right. I'm also going to change the size of my button and make it so it holds that 14 size because I want to make my button big. Right. Make sure that my button text fits and put it near the bottom of my screen so it exits. Right. Now I want my exit button. This is one thing I do. I want my exit button. When I click on my exit button, I want it to exit my application. Right. So remember, who remembers how to do that from last week? Application.exit. That sounds nice to me. So I double click on this little button here. So when I click on the button, and I'm just going to kind of close this off here so you guys can see better, and I'll kind of make it so it goes up. Here's my application. I'm going to say application, not app domain, application.exit. Right? Application.exit. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to kind of do this up and then run this thing. A splash screen, 1 Mississauga, 2 Mississauga, 3 Mississauga, right? My button comes up, and then I click exit, and we're good to go, right? That's cool. I like the exit button. What if I want to pass information from one form to another form? Like we asked for that, eh? Like one of your requirements for your form here, let's kill this now, because we did this splash screen stuff, is I want to be able to pass my information from my selection form into my order form, right? Because remember, you're going to pass here, you choose your movie, and you do this whole funky picture thing. I'll let you guys figure the picture out. I can't tell you everything. Come on, this is like giving you the answers, right? And then in here, if you notice, this is where you have. I don't have a menu here, but I do have a menu here in my order form, right? In my order form, if you notice, I have this title, category, blah blah, and it has to pass through from here. How do I pass that on? Well, kind of did that, didn't we? Right? We did that because we've kind of got it in place for a couple reasons, right? First reason we have this in place is this. If I look at my Solution Explorer here, let me pin this in for a second. I have a couple of things. I have a movie class, right? My movie class is universal. It works for my entire app, right? So that's one thing. Movie class. And I want to be able to pass in information, things I've chosen from my movie form, this form, into another form, like maybe like an end form or something like that. And so how do I do that? How do I pass information from here to something else? Well, first, in order for us to test this, right, we're going to make another form, right? Let's do it. So right click, and we're going to go add, new item. I know you're getting sick of this, eh? All these new forms, and she's getting sick of it already. I can see it in her eyes. You.
Oh, no,
that was you. That was you. You know, you're getting sick. You're getting sick. No. You don't want to do this anymore. I can see. I know it's the end of semester. And you're like, fucking Tom, stop for God's sake. What's wrong with him, right? We'll call this form end form, right? End form. Here it is, end form. Here's my end form, and you know what? The only thing we're going to put on the end form. Couple things. We need to go into properties for my end form. I want to change my Windows default location to center screen for my end form. And you know what? I really like that exit button, right? I like it so much, in fact, I'm going to copy it, right? So I'm going to copy it from this form, Control C, and I'm going to move it to end form, you know, Control V, right? So it's nicely done. And you know what? I'm not going to put my movie form, I'm not going to put an exit button on my movie form. I'm just going to close this off for a second. This movie form where my exit button exists, I don't want that. So I have this, the click event, and I'm just going to get rid of it because I don't want the click event to be there. So I'm going to kind of delete it. And if I go back into my, my movie form itself, like if I look at this here, I notice that my exit button is still there. You know why? Because I have programmed it. But I can safely take it away now, right? Because if I take it away, I've removed the event handler, and I can still see my form, right? First, you remove the event handler, and then you can take it away. If you've programmed anything in there. If there's nothing in there, if you just remove the event handler, it wipes it away for you, right? But if there's something in there, it won't wipe it away because maybe there's some code in there that you want. So Microsoft says, by default, if there's some code in there, don't wipe the event handler away. Leave it for the user or the programmer, and if they want something to be taken out of there, they can do that, right? Okay, so we don't want this as an exit button now. We want this as a next button. We've already styled it, which is nice. So we're going to go into properties, and I'm going to change this to my properties. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. Properties, and I want to go and change the text to next. And I want to go to the top and change the button to next button. And in my movieform.cs, as an example, I can probably close this thing off because I don't need this anymore. But let me leave it open for a second because I might have to go and double click on the next button. Here's my exit button. Make sure, let's say make sure that it's named right. It's named exit button as well. So everything's good. And you know what? In here, my toolbox, my final form, in my end form, whatever you want to call this thing, I'm going to drop in a label. Right? So here's my label, and I'm going to drop it in. But instead of dragging and dropping it in there, why not just take it from one that already exists, which I already have here, and I'll just take my title label and my title box here, and I'll Control C, and I go to my end form and Control V, and I'll put it in there. So here's my title, right? Now this title is different than the other title. They're called the same things, and they're different forms. They're different classes, right? So here's my end form. One thing I got to do my end form is I got to name it, right? So let's do a couple things. I'll call this end form, my title. I'll take away my control box, so the only way you can close the form down is with this exit button. So here's my control box, and instead of true, I'll make it false. And you know what? I'll take away the other funky effects of it too, like the minimize and maximize buttons. So maximize box, false, and minimize box, make that a false too. Why not? So false, false. There's no buttons anymore. And you know what? Let's get rid of that icon. Show icon to false, so I got no icon. Okay, so now so I want my movie title to appear here. Let's just check to see what it is. It's called movie title text box, just like before. Everything is preserved. Why? If I was to copy and paste it in the same form, it would give me another default value, right, for my variable names, because it's in the same form. But if I copy and paste it into a new form, it retains all the features, the name, everything, right? This is cool. So if I have next button, next button, next button, if I want to put a bunch of next buttons, if I make one and I style it properly, I can use it again and again, right? Okay, so in this particular case, I just want this form to work. So I'll double click on exit so I can add in that application.exit, not app domain, I did it again. Application.exit, so this is where my form will exit. All right, so in here. And if you remember how this works, right, so here's my end form, right? I'm just going to unpin these things for a second so we can see things more clearly. I want to pass information from one form to the next. Well, here's my end form. This is where it's going to go into. And this is my movie form. This is where it's coming from. Now remember, when I click my next button, I want to hide this one down and show my other one. How do we do that? Well, double click. Here's my click button. And inside my next button, I'm just going to make this a little bigger for you. And my next button, of course, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say this.hide, right, to hide my form off. And I want to make the new form. So I'm going to do the same thing as last time. So I'm going to say end form, which I've already created, and I'll say end form, lowercase, is equal to new end form. Okay, well, bear with me here. This is where it gets funky, right? And I want to say, well, after I hide this one, I want to show the other one. So I'm going to say end form dot show, right? This is my form. Okay, cool. So now in this particular case, I've got my new form going on, right? Does my new form know anything about my my owner? Right now, no. So if I was to go back, I have to set my end form, the owner of my end form, to this. So I'm going to say end form dot owner. Remember, we did this last time, right? Is equal to this, right? And what I'm saying when I say this, I mean this form, right? So the current form. So I can always refer back. Yeah.
If you hadn't entered endform.owner equals this, what would it recognize this as?
Nothing. You would never know what this is. This would be undefined.
And in the other one, we used this, in this lesson, we just used the this.exit, and it recognized that it was this one.
Yeah.
Using
Application.exit. We don't have to do that. But let's just go back. This dot hide, you mean, like this. This dot hide. This, And this particular case refers to the form. And this refers to the form. It's the context that we're in right now. Okay? Okay, let's check this out and see if it works. So I'm going to run this thing the way it is. Be funky. There we go. Oh! What happened? What happened? How come it closed down? Let's check that out again. Maybe mine just was funky for 1 tech second. It definitely was funky. Cool. And then I click next, right? And when I click next, it closes this one and shows this one, yeah? When I click exit, it closes it down. So we have some partial functionality here between forms. What I need to do now is pass in the information from one form to the other. Okay. So I know that my movie form, right, also has a property that's public, right, that I made it on purpose public, this list called movies, yeah? Theoretically, should I be able to access this property from my end form? Don't know. Let's take a look. So if that's true, and here in my form, right, and let's just do it on in my end form initializer here, inside my constructor. This is the constructor for my form. I could say something like this dot owner, right? This dot owner dot, and can I say movies? Well, no, I can't access movies. How about the thing movies? Can I do movies? No, right? I don't have access to that property whatsoever, right? How do I make this so that my, because remember I have this dot owner, right, is the form itself, right? And I have all these other things, activate, I have a button, I have cancel buttons, I have my form closed event, I have a bunch of default values here that are attached to my form. Mouse click, opacity, parent form, you know, blah, 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 all these different things. I need to access, you know, information from one form to the other. So a couple ways I could do this, right? I could pass in what I want into my constructor by creating my own custom constructor. My public end form function right now method is if you notice, it's an empty constructor. It takes nothing, right? I could try and do that, which means I'd have to rewrite my form here that takes in a list of movies, some kind of object, right? As an example, I want to send in my movie list, right? Because I want to be able to send that information in there. Or maybe just the title, whatever the string that I want over to send over. That might be something simple as well. Let's try that first. So say a string. I'm going to rewrite my constructor and see if this works. Or it's going to cause me an error. My string, and of course it's going to be called my movie title, something like that, movie title, right? And inside my movie title, this is something that's going to be incoming into my form, but I need to kind of set it so that I can access it somewhere else. So here it comes into my constructor, and I'm going to create something that's going to be almost like a property, if you will. Let's call this a private, well, up here in the class, because it's still a class, right? I'm going to make a private instance variable, and I'm going to call this private, right? And it's going to be of type string, and it's going to be an underscore to show that it's private, and we'll call this movie title, right? I could do that, right? Movie title, right? And I could do something like this. I could say, well, when my movie title comes in, I can set, after I initialize my components on the form itself, that's what this one does. I'm going to leave that untouched. I could set this to say this dot underscore movie title, because we know it's still a class, is equal to movie title. I could do that, right? And you would be forgiven to think that this is probably the way to do it. But however, if I go back to my movie form, and I look down here when I instantiate my movie form itself, you notice that new end form needs something else here, right? I'd have to pass in the movie title. So of course it's available here, and I can say movies, right, and so on. But it's not the movie I want. It's the title. When I click next, I want to take my movie title text box.text and pass that in, right? This part here. So I'm going to copy this and kind of put that in here, right? Now, if this is good, we're good to go. It's going to pass in my movie title text box.text into the next form, just like we normally would instantiate an object, right? and we're good to go. Let's see if this thing works. Nice idea, Tom, but let's see if execution. Be funky. I don't want to get any errors yet, right? Da-da-da. Oh, popped away again. That's probably because I touched it. Let's just make sure that that's, yeah, it's just behind. Because I touched my, this thing here, and that's why it popped behind. Okay, that's good. So let me just try that again so I can see it again. So 1, 2, 3 Mississippi, kind of pops up, and then I move over here and click next. Goes to my next form. Nothing here yet because I haven't programmed that in, but there's no errors, which is what I didn't want. Okay, let's press exit. This is how I test. I test kind of one little step at a time. Does it give me an error? Does it give me an error? Does it give me an error? No? Go back, go back, go back. Don't program too much at once. You program in chunks. You kind of eat the elephant one little chunk at a time. You can't swallow them or you'll choke, right? So that's the same idea here, right? So let's go into my end form, and oh, you're laughing at me again. Hold on here, and let's go into here. Now that we've got this movie title that's incoming, and we know we have this private variable movie title that comes in, right? I never want to mess with this thing again. I want to use it here. And what do I want to do? I want to say when this comes in, this movie title, I definitely assign it, but I also want to assign when my inform is created, right? I want to assign my title again. So again, I have this, I start typing movie title text box dot text, right, is equal to this dot underscore movie title. I'm doing it that way because this is definitely one way to do it. Okay, let's try this out. You guys got that? I'm passing stuff in from one form to the other. Yes. And yes. So I say I passed in information from one, passed it to the other. Definitely one way to do it. How about with getters and setters? If I wanted to use getters and setters, which is really the right way to do things, right? I don't want to pass things in through a constructor method. How can I pass things in with getters and setters? I could create getters and setters that are part of the actual form itself. So example, if I go back, I'm just going to exit this thing now. So that's definitely one solution. We go back to movie form. And I apologize in advance, I haven't taken a break yet. I will in 5 minutes. I will, if you go back to movie form, if you notice in the top here, I have this public list, but I also want to create getters and setters. If I wanted to do that, right? Now, if you notice something else, I couldn't access this public list here at all, right? From my end form, right? Even if I wanted to. Like if I was going to go into my exit button and let's say somewhere inside of here, and I want to access my movies. If I go movies, it doesn't go. I have movie. Movie is the class. I have access to that, but I got no access to the movies list at all. It's not there, even though it's public. It doesn't exist. Why? Because endform has no knowledge of it, right? The only way that endform would have knowledge of something like that is if somehow I passed in something like this, and there's different ways of doing this. But I could create something like getters and setters for me to do the same thing. I'll leave it to you if you want to figure it out, but to me, this is kind of easy. But what if I want to pass in more than one property? There's a couple ways I could do that. I could pass in string, movie title, blah, 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 whatever. I could do that, each one individually. And that might be the easiest way to do things. So if I want to pass in each individual thing, I could do that, right? I could even pass in my, as an example, each of these items. But maybe what we need to do is create like almost like a new class. I know that this is kind of funky. Almost like a container class that I want to pass in everything else. Like a final container class. So I have my movie, which is, it has my, my category, my title, and my cost, right? I have all those things. That's the movie, one individual movie that I'm passing in at the same time, right? But I'm creating a list of movies that I'm kind of throwing out, right? A list of movies that I'm kind of creating. Well, I could theoretically use my movie class, right? Because my movie class has a movie object. And in fact, if anything, I want to pass my movie object, the one that I've selected, on, right, to my forward into this class here, so I can get all three things instead of one. Still here in my constructor, right? Besides, then I have an actual object I can deal with, which is a lot meatier than if I was to use just one like string file. I could break it out this way too. I could deconstruct my my class object just like this. This is what when we talk deconstruction, I mean take each individual property and deconstruct it, pull it out, and throw it into each individual parameter. But what I'd probably want to do, which is neater and a lot cleaner and more beautiful from a programming perspective. I know I used beautiful before, and some guys, I think some people yesterday, I think Christina just went like, she almost threw up yesterday when I said beautiful, right? When I was talking programming, right? But what I mean by that is it's pretty ugly if I was going to do that the other way, right? I'm doing it this way here. When I click on my next button, I send in, as an example, this movie title text. I don't want to do that. So how do I assign that? Well, one thing I know is this. I know that when I get this movie index and movie combo box selected index, whatever this is, right? I'm actually pointing to this movie object right here, movie index title. So I've made this movie index local to this method, this movie combo box selected index change event handler. But nothing says that I can't make this movie index a variable that I want to use that's private, right? So as an example, I could make this, I'll say private instance variable. Bear with me. That's going to be used inside my class, right? And it's going to be an integer, right? And we're going to call this movie index, right? If I'm not wrong. Let's just see if that's clear. So movie index is right here. Right, here's my movie index. My movie index is set up here, and I definitely want to refactor it so it takes on the underscore. So I'm going to right click here and refactor, rename, and just add an underscore to the beginning of this thing, just to comply with our convention. That's all it's doing here. So I'm just going to apply that. And now when I go down here, I have my movie index here, and it gets set here. It's set for the entire application. It doesn't get set just for this method, right? It gets set everywhere, right? I'm just going to put the this in there. So now because now it's an instance variable, and I'd like to put this in there anytime I can, because I think it's important for us to understand which variable we're talking about, and that's why I use this. So this is cool. Well, that means that instead of sending movie title textbox.text, I could do something like this. Movies, like this, and I send this whole thing in here, and I send this across into here, right? Because when I come to here, right, it's already selected, movies, this movie index. Now the reason why it's giving me an error is because it's expecting on the other side a string, and I'm giving it a movie. All right? You guys are saying, Tom, you're making it complex again. Yes, I am, because I'm allowed to at the end. And then if I go back to my end form, if you notice I'm listening for a movie title. I don't want a movie title anymore. I want to listen for a movie. So movie, and I'll call it selected movie, right? Here's what it is. And now this dot movie title, right, which is this, that doesn't make any sense anymore for me to just have the movie title. So I might as well create, something like selected movie as a private member variable, which is of type movie. Because I've already got that class, might as well use it, right? So private, I'll say movie, selected underscore, selected movie, right? Here it is, right? Is equal to new movie. Right, that's what it is. So selected movie. And if you notice, it says, hey, there's a problem, right? There's a problem because I need a string, a category, and all this kind of stuff, right? I can't just instantiate this like this. Well, what I could do, instead of doing this, right, is I could say, well, my movie variable is a selected movie. And what I want to do, because I know that classes are reference types, right? I'm moving an object around, and here's my selected movie, right? I want to say, well, instead of this movie title is equal to movie title, I want to say this dot underscore selected movie, right, which is my instance variable, is equal to the selected movie, who I called select movie. Selected movie that's incoming from my constructor, right? So I can do that, right? Because that basically is creating a reference to the movie that I had before. Now my movie title textbox.text is this dot underscore selected movie, right? As an example, which is that one movie dot title, right? Because selected movie is a movie. and putting it in as a string type, going into the text, and we're good to go. This should work. If I have a problem, we'll know in a second. I'm just going to right click and, start this thing, be funky, hands off, death race 2, next, death race 2. Okay. All good. So now this time I've passed in my entire movie across, which is all 3 parameters in one blow, as opposed to each individual parameter. And this is what I call nicer programming, more beautiful programming than the ugly way of deconstructing each of my the properties of my class and throwing it across, right? Because remember, 2 things, the reason why I know that this can be done. 1, arrays, list types, collections, generics, classes, all reference types, which means when I pass an object over, I'm passing a reference to the object, right? I don't have to create a new object to receive it. I already have an object. All I'm doing is I'm pointing to that new object. I have to have a place for it to come to. As an example, in my end form, if I go to my end form, I need to create a container, which is this thing right here, for my object. All it's going to be is a pointer. I'm pointing to that particular, I'm making a reference to that object. But I'm getting the reference into my constructor, which is coming inbound here. So here what I'm doing is, I have access to the entire movie class, which Jay helped me write yesterday, right? And so now if I want to create more titles, the cost and everything else, I could simply access each of the properties of my selected movie using the .accessor method, which is much nicer. Questions before I finish this section off? Yes? Sure, sorry. All I've done is I've thrown in an index. This is my movies, right? And I've thrown this in across into my end form, right? Because this is the index that I've created, right? This index points to the movie that I've selected, right? And now I'm throwing across, when I say movies, remember movies, what movies is, if I go to the top here, movies is actually, right, a list of movie objects, right? So my movie object is the one that I'm referencing here by using this index, my movie index. I'm saying this index, I'm pointing to that object. That's the one that's been selected, Tom. So that's the one I want to send across to my next form, right? Complex? I'll update GitHub for those people who are watching who can't make theirs go. You may have missed something, and that's okay. I know I'm going fast, but I want you to see this format because, again, like I said earlier, you're going to see more complex stuff in Programming 3. These are all the changes I've made. I've got one on-track file. I'm going to add all, and I'm going to go in here and say created end form and passed data, right? Commit, home, and unsync commits, sync. Now you should have everything that I've done so far with my application. So let's look at the completed application before we end off. So I start off, I've got my Be Funky, splash screen. It goes into Death Race. I can choose Season of the Witch, which updates everything here. I click Next, and then Season of the Witch comes up over here. Now remember, things that are missing in this particular example, you don't have all the piece parts to make your application. I think I've got most of it for you, right? I've got the splash screen, I've got the timer, I've got all those things going for you. You can apply them to your own app right now. You got almost everything you need. Things that you do need that you may want to pass on and include in your class, which I did not include, things that you got to figure out on your own to get the A, right? Is you probably want to include some kind of a reference or some kind of property that includes an image, right? So you can pass on either a reference to the image, not the actual image itself. You don't want to store images in your class. That's crazy. I mean, that makes your class pretty big, right? Maybe an image reference, a reference to your image. And I would refer back to that first application we made, or one of the first ones we made when we did that gallery, when I did that resources.bitmap kind of thing that I did, and the first thing we did, I want to send that almost like a link to that reference into my class. So that way when I send it forward, then I know how I can reference at least some kind of link, or at least in your mind, even if you don't change the class I've created, somehow to link to the object. Make sure that you name it properly according to the movie that you're looking at. Now remember, in this exercise that you're doing here for my select form, and order form. You have this other object called stream form, and stream form is just another form, right? That comes up, but I don't hide my other one. This comes up. It could be I didn't tell you how to do it. If you look at what it says here, stream form, if you look at what it is, it says you have an OK button, add an OK button, right? Add a label, add these different things. This is not, if you look at what this is, stream form is not a message box. If you think stream form is a message box, you'll be wrong, baby, right? Because that's not what it is. So don't make a message box for your stream form. Other students in the past have done that and they've lost lots of marks. Message form is not, and message box is not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for another form that pops up, is modal, which means it won't allow you to go to any other form, right, until you click the OK button. So there's some tricks here that I will not talk about. These things that you need to figure out for yourself, right? So I want you to take a look at this, okay? When the OK, the OK button to the form, when the OK button is clicked, the form will close, and the application will terminate, it says, right? For stream form, right? So this is not a message box. Okay. Other things that are in here as well. If you notice that I have in my order form, in my select form, I have a splash screen and so on, a control box and blah, blah, blah. I also have in my order form a menu strip, which I've designed, which we talked about, which is right here. This is my menu strip that I've asked you for my application, right, in my order form. And it says there's a cancel button, and it's asking for shared event procedure, which means shared event handler. That's what it means, right? I've got a stream button that goes to my next form, and then a print menu and all that kind of stuff that adds things in here. There's an about menu selection, which would display an about box containing the programmer's name, the version of the program, and blah, blah, blah. What the hell is an about box? Well, we have an about box, don't we? Right? An about box is an item that I haven't talked about yet, which you should look and see how to do. This is one of your to-dos, all right? How do I add an about box? I'm going to add it in here, right? And I'll show you where to find it. I actually kind of showed it to you already. You go add, right, new item, and their about box is in here. If you look down here, there's an about box right here. Let's leave it at about box 1. Don't rename this for a second. I'm going to click add. And what this does, it creates this about box. Here's my about box. It kind of creates product name, version, copyright, blah, 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 whatever, right? This is my about box. It's already built in. It's not like it's a big deal, right? But how do I activate this thing? So I got to activate my about box, show my about box, and when I press OK, it's going to go away, right? Well, there's a couple of things to do here. This is where you'd have to figure things out on your own. But what I want you to do is when you go to your menu, right, as an example, for now, let's move the next button aside here for a second. I said I was going to stop, but I'm not stopping. I'm sorry. And I will make a new button over here for now and rename this thing. And so I feel guilty for not showing you how to do stuff. It's bad. I'm just terrible that way. About button. Because I feel guilty. Then they're going to say, Tom never showed me how to do this, and he put it as an assignment, and then I had to figure it out, and I struggled for days, and then I couldn't do it. So I'm going to double click on this thing, right? And here's my about box, and I'm going to say, well, about box, if I start typing about box 1 dot show, it doesn't allow me to do that, right? So look, I try. I can't do an about box 1 dot show, right? Why? About box 1, she don't exist, baby, right? She don't exist, right? Remember, it's just another form, right? I got to do the same crap again. So I got about box 1 is no about box, right? Is equal to new about box 1, right? And then when I do that, I got to say something like this. When I do my about box 1, I got to say about box dot show. Now, there's different ways. If I go show, this will do something for me, and show dialog will do something else. Let's try this out. And if I run and I go be funky, don't go away, yes. And I click about, it shows it. Oh man, it's way out here, I gotta fix that. But when I press OK, she stays, right? She stays, and I can still do something over here, right? See how this kind of works like this? That's bad. I want this to be modal. So when I click on the OK button, it won't allow you to click over here and keep this thing up here, right? Here's the other thing. What if I just want this to disappear, my about box, after a few seconds? right? We already know how to do that, right? 3 seconds, show 3 seconds, see you later, right? But I need to program this OK button. That's the problem. With the About box, it's not just thing. One thing I did notice, though, look, it gave me my lesson built in, my version, and my copyright information built in. And it had this like funky thing here that I never even programmed. Well, where does this thing come from? It comes from, let's go to next for a second and exit. It comes from my About box design. My About box has all this stuff built in, right? And if I go to project properties, and I go to application, if you notice here, I have something called assembly information. And I can change my assembly information to make it whatever I want. Here's my copyright. And maybe my assembly information is, instead of 1.0.0, it's 0.0.1. Maybe I'll do the same thing for my file version just to show you that I can do such a thing. And you know what? I have my title, my description, my prop, my company. I'll say, I'll call it Centennial College. Here's my company. Demo app for the last class, right? There we go, and press OK. When I do that, and if I save everything, and I click this close, and I go start, and I be funky, it shows my stuff, comes into my new form, click my About box, all that information is here, right? That's kind of cool. It's kind of linked into my assembly info, if you will. That's cool. And there's my little description of my app, right? So that's kind of cool to do. My OK button still doesn't work, though. This button works because it just closes it off, but my OK button, she don't work. I got to program that in by double-clicking on my OK button, and oh, wait, man, hey, man, how come it doesn't work? Oh, yeah, because I'm still running. Just double-click on my OK button. Here's my OK button, and what does my OK button do? It just closes my form, right? I'm not closing off my other form, but it closes this one off. So I'm going to say something like this dot close this time, as opposed to this dot hide. I don't want to hide my About box. I want to close it off altogether and let it be instantiated every time. I have no problem with that. Okay, cool. If you notice, there's some extra stuff that's included in my About box automatically. And by the way, you can add other things in here as well. Okay, cool. So that's the About box in a nutshell. I do have other issues with this About box. If I click on the form itself, it says About box. That's what I don't want it to say. I maybe want it to say something like About, which I can rename just like any other form. And I can also definitely start it says center parent. I don't want center parent. I want center screen, which is this. Everything's what I'm doing here. And the other thing is I'm starting it off with a dialogue, or sorry, show. But what if I did a show dialogue instead of a show? So here's my my movie form, and it says show, but I want to change this to show dialogue, because I can do that too, right? Show dialogue. What's the difference between show and show dialogue? We'll see right here. If I go start, be funky, right? And I go through, and I click About, and it opens up, and I try and click over here. Now it's modal, baby, right? I can't do anything until I click this away. If I click this, closes, and now I can go to next. Now we're done. Now I've shown you everything, okay? You know how to do the whole bloody application. I've just given you all my secrets, okay? That's it. But that's the way you would do it. And the thing is, remember, show dialogue, you can create almost like a modal, your own custom modal form that comes out. It takes control of the application. That's what modal means, until you flush it away, by using an exit or an OK. Let me update that Team Explorer, because you guys will kill me now, right? And I'll say changes, add all, and then added About box, right? So commit, home, and unsync commits, sync. For the next 8 minutes, I want to talk about tomorrow, or next week a little bit. And so I will close this application down, right? There's certain things we didn't get to, but that's okay. Don't despair, don't worry, right? There's things we're going to talk about. We did talk about collections, which is really what I want to get to. I didn't want to talk about Link or ADO or the Entity Framework, but Entity Framework, we really would just scratch the surface with it. And I'd rather have you know this stuff, in my opinion, than anything else. But let's go back to what it's going to look like next week. So next week, again, I'm going to make you do some kind of, on day one, right, which is going to be the Tuesday, starting off at 12:30, we're going to do a little quiz type thing. That's your exam. So day one is going to be a quiz, 12:30 to 2:30. I'm probably going to give you an hour and a half to figure this out. There probably is going to be something like at least 20 questions. And it could cover anything that we've covered so far. You might even see questions that you've already seen before, right? So if you study, whatever, it's an open book quiz. So you can look at your book and all that kind of stuff. It will not be open internet though. It is your final exam. So you'll have access to everything other than Google. So you have access to your PowerPoint presentations. You'll have access to your book. You'll have access to, you can bring your book in. You have access to anything that I've discussed. You have access to YouTube. If you really want to go through and listen to that, I don't know why you'd want to do something like that, but let's just say. So you have access to that. But on that quiz, it covers anything we've covered in this entire course. Anything. I mean, so if I've covered it, it's fair game, right? So this is where the challenge comes in play. I'm not going to put anything in there that I haven't covered. Nothing like if it's in the book, and like example, I'm not going to put on the quiz ADO.net. I didn't cover that, right? I'm not going to put entity framework. I'm not going to put stuff that we covered too much this week, because this week is like the last week, and you guys are being bombarded by stuff all over the place. So me getting you to figure that out. But anything else we've covered, fair game. Day 2, which is would be the Wednesday at 8:30. And people are going to choke. I got asked yesterday. It was funny. Can you make day 1 the practical and day 2 the quiz? Because I'm just not good waking up early. I can't do it, man. I can't do it. There's a reason for that. But anyways, 8:30 in the morning is when this practical stuff happens. You'll be given an hour and a half to figure it out. It's going to be some kind of form application you're going to have to build. If you've done your work on your previous assignment, assignment 6, and you're working on assignment 7, you should be fine. Okay? If you haven't touched assignment 6 for whatever reason, you didn't hand it in, right? And you haven't started assignment 7 and you're going to wait till Thursday to finish it out for Friday, you're not going to do well because it's going to include forms, transferring information between forms, application, the whole thing's menus, anything that I've talked about forms, it can include, right? You need to know this stuff. I'll give you your time. Now, for that one, you'll have access to the internet because you need to know MSDN. You'll have access to every tool you want. It won't matter, just like last time, because you're in a time crunch. You have an hour and a half to do it all, right? So if you haven't practiced, you're SOL, right? You're going to be in trouble. You won't be able to finish it all. There probably will be some kind of extra coding involved as well. It won't just be about the form. So there might be some kind of class, like we just did now with this movie class, where you incorporate all piece parts, almost like an assimilation of everything you've done so far in this semester in one. Now, you only have an hour and a half, so I can't make it so complex. And there's a possibility, I'm just going to say it like this, that I will work together with Jake, right, to create my final exam, right? I'm just going to put it out there, right? I may work with Jake, which means that level of complexity and marking difficulty goes up, right, for the final. I'm just saying, right? So if I do, right, you may have the same kind of idea, same kind of thing. It might be very similar to what they get in their class. It may not be exact because obviously if you guys have the same as theirs, you guys can pass it on and share it with other people and blah, blah, blah. So it may not be the exact one, but it'll be very similar to that. Any questions about the exam piece parts next week? 2 parts to it. We have our written part, more theoretical, just to patch up all the theory that you've missed, right? If I haven't asked a question, I'll ask you theoretical questions, and there'll be another piece on practical. So 2 parts of the exam. Please don't miss either part because they'll be weighted so that the final exam, which is worth 20%, chances are I'll probably weigh my practical side a little heavier than my other piece, right? So, it doesn't make sense for me to make theoretical and practical equal at this point, right? So just warning, if it's 20%, I might make your practical 15 and your written 5, right? It might happen like that. So from a balance perspective, you're still going to work equal to 20, right? But so you won't completely be, if you're not good at practical, then at least you have a few marks from the theoretical, right? But it won't be more than 5 to 7 marks. Let's just put it that way. Maybe I'll make it 13 to 15 on the other side, right? Something like that, because 3, oh, can't do that. I got to give a little bit more for people who aren't good practically, right? They're not good really practically, but they're great theoretically, and I want to kind of balance it off a little bit. It's got to be a bit of both. Any questions about next week? Any questions about so far? Anything else that we're missing? Please speak up now, right? Because I think it's important for us to talk about this. I don't want you to be blindsided next week. We got to make sure that the test is doable within an hour and a half, both sides. I know it's a double test, like again, it's a double whammy. I'm gonna try and make the first part, like your written one, as easy as I can make it. So even though you'll have the full an hour and a half, it won't be an hour and a half. For me to make it an hour and a half, I'd have to make 90 questions on this thing, right? There's no way I can make it 90 questions. I mean, you know what? I think making the exam online will just probably kill me. I'd probably like suffer some kind of toxic shock, right? To make 90 questions for you guys to answer, right? At most, I would say something like 40, at most. I don't think there's gonna be more than that. 40. Yeah, four questions. And this when we're 4%. No. Something like that, 40 in that range. Yeah. I could recap, but what if there might be someone who this is my only issue? I'll do a recap. I don't mind for next day, like almost like a review for next. I could. My only concern is that people come in late for the quiz. They start off late, then I'm recapping while they're writing their quiz. It's an exam, right? I could say so. The first hour will be the quiz, but that means I'm limiting you now. Now the quiz becomes harder again, right? Because I've just limited your time to an hour, right? And then you're missing the other piece parts, right? So let's play it by ear, if I can. I'll recap. By the way, just to say, I am available if you have any questions, problems, whatever. Today between 12:30 and 6:30, I have some space still left in my schedule. I won't be here tomorrow, right? So Thursday I'm not available. Friday I am available for consultation remote. So if you want to give me a call or whatever, send me an email. If you have some kind of problem or whatever, you need to review something. That's great, but other than that, it'll be today between 12:30 and 6:30, and that's really it for me.